Okay, now our Cohen changed the title very spontaneously this morning because it might fit a little bit better. Investigating the basis for categorization and symbol grounding. That is the title now. It is inspired by the puppy example given in the book, How the Body Shapes the Way We Think. And so we are planning an experiment that we'll introduce. The overview on the presentation, or first, it's very basic for our experiment to get some definitions. One on categorization, then on bottom-up and top-down processes. Then I'll quick describe the experiment. Then there will be, well, in our group, it happened that there were two agents or two things developing in parallel, initialized by the idea. And so I'll present one very briefly. The person who was doing it is not here today. She's not available. But then we'll go to the practical work that was done with the three of us presenting concerning the puppy. And then, well, we're all looking forward to the last point, the discussion, and talking about further plans. And so the definition of categorization, I used a very, I chose a very basic one here. At first, dividing sensory input into classes according to its functional relevance. So this is combining two ways to think about categorization. The act of categorization is not exactly category learning, but so it can be seen as a sensory motor occurrence, combining sensory motor skills and then higher cognition, but also it can be seen as just recognizing the things in the world. And that's the second thing, is what is usually investigated in psychological research with the interest on higher cognitive processes. But our interest was really to go to the bottom, to the basis, and see how do sensory motor occurrences lead to categorization. And so what is necessary to start to categorize, to find differences or borders between in between sensory motor streams. So similarity patterns must be recognized, it must be updated, they must be, or updated thing must be integrated into those patterns that are recognized. And then the question arises, does learning occur already due to those repeated patterns and the body constraints, or is there something else necessary, like adaptivity to something through that provide kind of a reinforcement to reproduce these patterns, so that intentionally maybe they are used. So is the question, is bottom-up only sufficient, or is it always bottom-up plus top-down? So this leads me to this definition that about what is bottom-up, what is top-down, and this is quite difficult, although it's very important for the experiment that we are planning, but it's very difficult to really separate it. So first, we wanted to relate to a definition from cognitive neuroscience, and there, bottom-up processes are defined as upstream neural activity that is environmentally or stimulus-driven, and those upstreams, they might be modulated by top-down, and top-down is provided by internally by memory, context, or also task-driven, and or the idea of the task, the cognitive idea of the task, of course, in this case, and so in cognitive neuroscience, they call it recurrent. Of course, for us, recurrency has different meanings, but there, this is the definition for top-down. And separately from this, or maybe also going further, looking at investigations or research on motor development, that is more in the direction of this, what was explained as bottom-up before. So self-organizing properties, they assemble usefully. For example, there's illustrations that I'm using are from works of Esther Thielen, who was also doing research on movements of babies. I cannot go into this because time is too short. So they assemble usefully, those movements, those reflexes, related always to a context. I think that was important for her too. And those synergies that of the dynamical systems that develop, they allow reduced energy. So that's why it's called they assemble usefully. And so here already it shows that, well, it's a matter of definition. Is this usefulness, the reduced energy, is this, although of course it's no higher cognitive process, but doing an algorithm for this, it's difficult to separate. Is this now top-down, or is it still the bottom-up stream? So what can be seen as purely bottom-up? And the idea was then to compare those two conditions in an experiment by implementing only bottom-up processes in gates. We were deciding on gates, and they develop in an agent through bottom-up. And the second condition was to use also maybe these gates for a purpose, or to reinforce them in some way, so that there is a top-down connected to the bottom-up. And this leads, of course, because there has to be communication between the neural circuit or neural network that is working bottom up with the other one. And it could be, that's also taken from the book, the suggestion, it could be already a means of, or a very rudimentary means of symbolization. I would like to introduce now the work of Yasmin that was provided to us this morning. And she built a little robot, a soft robot that she called ShakerBot, and tried to let this robot categorize between good and bad environment. And she did it through a reinforcement algorithm. She said it was a greedy reinforcement algorithm. So it was supposed to walk on a line, or that was the goal. So the line was good, the rest was bad. Line. So the agent was provided with a light sensor and with one servo motor that could go straight, left, or right. And the light sensor could detect the line that was given a value 0, and the further it was away from this line, the higher the value rose. So each episode was that first the movement was sensed, then there was random action going right or left or whatever, then there was a new sensing of the environmental state, the calculation of the distance to the preferred state was reinforced. And with repeating this episode, so it was possible that this little robot learned better to walk on the line. And when we were discussing this, well, she was explaining this to us some days ago, and when we were discussing it, and we were not so sure about what kind of categorization was happening there, because the value of the line was already implemented in the agent. And so it was, I think it's a difficult question to see, to understand this in connection to the idea of the equipment. And this, a second limitation that she was mentioning, that Yasmin was mentioning herself, was that the gates themselves, they were not for this little robot. They did not have the meaning. It was just the walking on the line, learning how to walk on the line, but the gates, they were not categorized. Okay, I want to leave this work now and come to the other work that we'll present today, our puppy example. It has a developmental approach. The simulation is using a WebOps puppy as a very reduced model at first. Maybe some things might change, but now it has only 4 sensors. Will be introduced to you in a moment through Beatrice and Vishal. We are using, or it was suggested to us, for analyzing the output, sensor output of this simulation, we were using an ecostate network, and as a first step to see is it possible to recognize the patterns in them. And well, ecostate network is it's used for temporal pattern recognition, and it's possible to be trained. And for us, it's also interesting that it is in biological computations, it is compared to microcircuits, neural microcircuits that are relating to working memory or sensory motor control. So this is quite fitting. Okay, now I hand over to Beatrice.
Hi. So, Carol, can you mute your microphone?
Pardon me? Should I turn off my microphone or what?
Mute.
Yeah, okay, it's muted.
I think now, yeah, now I can hear myself. So, what we did as a first approach, we just took the PAPI robot that from the ShanghAI lectures, and we started playing with the 4 parameters that would alter the 4 parameters which are defined in the controller, which would alter the movement of each of the legs by changing the legs, like the offset of the legs, of each of the leg, the amplitude or the frequency. So we just predefine those and predefine a number of gates, which really PAPI should have done, but that might be in a later stage of the project. We implemented some sensors on each of the touch sensors on each of the feet of the PAPI, and took and read the data. And you can see the data on the bottom. So it's not very energy efficient. I'm sure that if we manage that to make PAPI come up with a good solution, it will do better than us. So you can see that like the force in the front kind of accumulates, like, and yeah, this is a very short sample of data, but yeah. So we took that data and tried to feed it into a neural net. Well, that was my, I don't know, because visual is meant to present the part from the neural network, but
yeah, if you could just give an overview, since he isn't here yet, just try to give an overview of what was done. And
so we fed that, we stimulated a neural network with a sensor, with these sensor data for pressure sensors, and I'm not quite sure how to interpret it. We didn't actually manage to get a pattern, I think. This is the data from the sensors, and this is the pattern. But it would be interesting to look at each of these on their own, and it would also be interesting to implement other type of sensors and record the data. Yeah, well,
maybe oh, excuse me.
I'll hand it over to Carol now. All yours.
Well, it's there were some videos recorded on the 3 different gates, but the time is so short, and Visha is not here, so maybe we just leave this away. But for the presentation, his plans were to show 3 different gates, and the data. Oh, I have to go back to the PowerPoint for a moment. So this is a good gate, like trotting, that has a kind of regularity in the PAPI. This was a bad gate, it fell over, and then there was, of course, nothing left from the sensors. And this is galloping, another good one. And so he fed the he fed the data in the well, where is this thing? Yes, if he fed the data, you know, the time was 20 seconds, then for the 4 senses here, he fed it in the echo network, and at first with the original values or parameters, there was a very high error rate, but then he increased the internal units quite high, and then the error rate dropped. And so it was on a good gate, I think, from left, where I have to error rate on the sensor data from left in gate 1 and gate 2 bad. Well, I'm sorry, I don't understand everything, but at least that's what he was saying. So it is either the data was not enough, or it is necessary to take many more internal units to change those parameters, but then it might be possible to do the analyzation with that. So, well, I don't know what else I could add now to what Vishal was going to present. I would maybe come to the last slide. That is again taking up the idea of the experiment, and that I still like very much. But maybe you know I'm a psychology student. I'm not so I'm not programming. I know a little MATLAB, but I'm more in the theoretical part of it. So I like this idea very much, in contrast to the usual psychological investigations, and I like the comparison of those two. So the experimental design, I think, is quite interesting. Of course, the direct comparison, since the conditions are not exactly alike, is not really possible, but it's, well, I think it's like a thought game. But of course, like the definitions, what is bottom up, what is top down, that was mentioned before, and also what is the context that is defining the criteria that we are referring to. Those two questions, I think, they are still quite open. So, well, it should be always shown. I come back to the slide now, and okay, that was the presentation, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's give an applause. Thanks a lot for a very nice presentation, and thank you for improvising. I know that's not easy. So luckily Vishal couldn't make it, it looks like, but you made a good show out of it. So let's open up for questions from the panel now. Anyone have questions? Can't see any hands. No? Okay. Okay, so let me. I think you've approached a very. It's a very complex problem, and it's actually a problem that you came up with by yourself. You've gotten. I think you've gotten quite far on it actually, and you've started really getting to a point where you're starting to see real results and trying to match that up with your expectations and what you were thinking in the beginning. Now, we've been talking a little bit about this in the group, but do you think you would be willing to try to keep working a little bit in this direction together as a group? Could that be something you'd be interested in?
Well, can I speak? Or
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Well, what I heard from now Beatrice, she is disconnected in the moment, but also Vishal, is that there is high interest in going on. Yes. For me, it's thematically interesting, and it's fun to work in the group. It depends a little bit on the time planning, of course, since every one of us is, of course, in other how do you say, other work. Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah, well, that's nice. I think potential, so hopefully you'll be able to do that. Any questions from the group, from the TAs, sorry? Comments?
I joined Martin to say that this is very interesting. Actually, you took a very hard challenges, so I'm not surprised that we still have mixed results. I think that in particular what you dub as condition 2 is interesting to investigate in the future. So if you are going to, of course, this will be after. So I think we will be happy to give advice if you continue on this line of research after the I mean the formal lectures ending, because actually they don't want to have formal lectures, so you can continue as long as you want, if you, of course, with your timings and respecting your constraints. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you too. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from TAs, questions, or from the group? No. Okay. Well, I think we are then good on time. We're just ready now to start the next group. So thank you, Carola. Thank you, Beatrice. Very nice presentation. And we can now disconnect, and we'll make space for the next group.
Okay. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so